Hey, welcome. I'm your man, Rod Love, and welcome to the sit down this evening. And do we have a show for you? Hey, let me go ahead and start off way to my left because I'm gonna save these guests, and y'all have seen them before, but I'm gonna save them for last. Miss Wynn, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. What about yourself?
I'm doing great, and of course, and I'm gonna just go ahead and say, Mr. Kenny was talking about this guy with this nice hat on this evening. Doc Polite, let me get that one, man. I know it's my size.
No,
Doc, how you
no.
doing, brother?
I got a little pea head, so
Oh, so
I
you
ain't
gonna
calling
be a
nobody
big
big
head?
head.
Okay, okay. With that,
Uh,
I'm gonna go directly and introduce our doggone guest for this evening. And I don't know, it seemed like it's coining that movie. We got the Smiths in the studio tonight.
Yeah.
So it brings us honor and pleasure and a great deal of pride to have Kenny Smith and his wife Grace Smith in the studio with us. And these are the Smiths with Grace Marr. Did I say it right?
You did,
Grace
sir.
Marr. And Grace Marr is out of Mecklenburg,
County.
Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Okay. Well, hold up. You can't go that fast now because y'all doing some great things, not just there, but you're doing some things around the country too.
Absolutely.
So, hey, I'm gonna introduce the wife first, man. I'll come to you later. Grace, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well.
I got to tell you, one of the things that I talk about all the time with our contractors, and we're going to be talking about responsible fatherhood tonight. But you and your husband created this training kit, and I know it's more than just responsible fatherhood. But I love the avatar that's in one of them that talks about co-parenting. Miss Wynn, I don't know if you or Doc saw this, but I don't know if it's the husband or the boyfriend or the spouse, but he's telling the wife that, hey, we're gonna put our kid in this other school. Am I going down right? Tell me right?
That's
You
right,
got it.
that's right.
And so he's doing one of the things I make mistakes in doing by telling instead of,
Instead of having a conversation.
instead of having a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that avatar, when you see, that avatar, is that one you, right?
In that little skit? No, that wasn't me in that little skit.
Okay.
No. I have my own avatar, but that wasn't me in that little
I've
skit.
seen your avatar, but when you look at the avatar, look at the man, like you done lost your rabbit mind.
Yeah, right.
But hey, you know what? But once again, welcome. But because I did a poor job of describing that, y'all hit that because that was so impacting to me and the group that was watching it.
Right.
That all we could say was that was so real.
Right.
Just like a
So
mom.
we have a fatherhood curriculum, and so my portion was to do the co-parenting piece. And the co-parenting piece is a big piece because it really is two adults that can't get along for the sake of the children.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so that's the problem. Earlier I was saying that, you know, sometimes I think it's the women can sometimes make it really hard for the fathers to get involved. You know, and I'm a woman saying that, right? So, and that's not to be biased. I do understand that, you know, there are women that are, you know, that are saying, hey, fathers, come, let's get involved, and the men. But a lot of times it's us, right? And it's because of hurt feelings.
Yes.
Hurt people, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Hurt
You're right.
feelings, and so they want to control and monopolize everything.
Yeah.
So that co-parenting piece was very, very important. And we decided we wanted to do little scenarios, right? Because sometimes when you see it on the screen, you're able now to relate, like, oh yeah, I remember that, right? Versus me just talking about it. So we made it really interactive,
Relatable.
very
Yeah.
relatable,
Yeah.
and it's up to the men now to choose the different responses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when you talked about him coming in there and just saying, this is what I'm going to do,
Yes.
think about it,
You're
right?
right. You're right.
It's gonna. Anybody in that situation would be like, well, wait a minute, like, don't I get a say?
Yeah,
this?
and the whole expression with the wife was like, whoa, wait. And it was like something we would do, like, excuse me?
Right.
What you talking about?
Exactly.
What?
Exactly.
And
like-
Well, let me ask y'all ladies
Go ahead, Doc.
something. Let me ask y'all ladies something. Do you ever when you're considering a man's feedback, how do you process it? Do you process it through the lens of your feelings or through what's practical?
Good one, Doc. Doc, you're gonna get us in trouble. Okay.
No, because
Sit right
because
Listen.
often in counseling, me and my wife are counselors. Okay, so
Yeah.
we specialize in marriage particularly, And one of the things we always recognize is that many women in America have been persuaded to look at men through their feelings and have an idea of what men should behave like. And they become upset a lot of times in these situations when the man does not feel the way that they do. We're not, and it's something I told my wife, I'm not interested in feelings. I want to know what the problem is and how to solve it.
So I want to know the answer to the question. Doc, that was a
yeah,
good question.
that's a very good question. And so here's how I process that. Initially, when I hear something, I do have feelings about it, but I take time to process it, right? I take time to process it, to go back. So now when I come back, I've left the emotion behind me, and I'm coming now to have the conversation, right?
But
'Cause
do
you're
you
right.
try to teach that?
You know what? I try to teach that.
Wait a minute.
No,
try
not to him.
teach that.
Not
told
to
you.
him.
Doc,
Hey,
I told
But
you.
you know,
not
you
to
said,
him, to
he
other
said,
women.
don't psychoanalyze me. Don't psychoanalyze me. But yeah, I think it's important because as human beings, we all feel what we feel. And you have to be
But
in that
that's
moment to feel
okay.
it. Give
But
yourself permission to feel it.
I can 100% guarantee you that the majority of men do not consider their feelings about a circumstance. They are looking at the problem. The analytical thing is the first thing that we're going to go through. We're not going to ever approach it in the way that women do. Y'all touchy feely about everything.
Yeah, you know what?
And so
Right.
we don't have that. We don't have that same mechanism, that nurturing thing that is innate in women is not the same as in men. We care, but we care in a different way.
I'm on the edge of my seat because
Fire.
yeah. You know why? Because that is a problem. That always poses arguments because everybody wants to be heard, right? So
Right.
I think men have to show their spouse or their partner that grace to just listen to what they have to say,
Yeah.
right? And then you can come back and get what you want from the conversation. But I think if we just automatically, no, that's not what I want. Let's go get right to it. I think that's gonna create some type of disruption and feeling.
Okay,
No,
okay, but
I'm
but
just talking in general. I'm just
but now-
talking in general.
now,
I think it's important.
okay, let's say you tell Kenny how you feel, right?
Change the subject.
No, because listen, this plays into the harmony. I'm trying to explain. This plays into the harmony of co-parenting and fatherhood and motherhood. Because
Okay, Doc, let me let folk know. This topic for tonight is responsible fatherhood. And what the audience is seeing right now is a very, very interactive conversation engagement. But here's what I want to do, because I love the dialogue. This doesn't serve as just a monologue for us. If you have an opinion or a comment or a statement, you're free to dial into the show. That phone number is area code 407-921-6195. And I'm sure Doc is going to get that number scrolling across the screen. But Kenny, I cannot let you sit over there quietly.
You gotta help him out.
Listen. On this topic, I am going to plead the fifth and refuse to respond to. No, I'm just joking. But my wife, she's right on top of it, because women and men, they just think differently, right? The way I best articulate is that nothing wrong with it, but I think women think with wires, men think in boxes, right? And because of that,
that's waffles and spaghetti.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying they think differently. They just think differently, and I think once you understand that as a man and as a woman, hopefully that creates a space where you can actually just kind of understand where one is coming from, right? I know my wife likes to explain everything to the detail. I'm like, I don't need the details. Give me the clip notes. Right? That's how men think.
But we have to
Right. But now,
Exactly.
if we don't, you
Right.
you gotta come back and say what?
Exactly.
What? So
Come back
that's
and
what-
something is misunderstood,
Yes.
right? And I said,
That's
I
what we
tried
have
to tell you,
explain it.
but you just wanted the high level.
Yes.
Sometimes
So-
you just got to get the details.
So there's a comedian out there named, I think his name is Ronnie Davis. So Ronnie, I can't remember his name, but he tried to help women understand men, and he gave a really good analogy. He says, ladies, if you want to understand a man, just watch ESPN. Watch how they boil a whole 3-hour football game down to 2.5 minutes. And that's all we need to see.
The 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes. Oh, the highlights. Got it. I know exactly what happened in the game.
And
That's how men think.
and
Not
to
good
that
or bad,
point,
that's how we think.
there's a skit on Facebook about a guy tells his wife that their neighbor went to the hospital. He said, Tom's in the hospital. And what's wrong? I don't know. I just know he's in the hospital. And she goes on for like 15 minutes. What hospital? I don't know. I just know he's in the hospital. And she wants all of these details. And all he knows is he's in the hospital.
In the hospital.
Yeah.
And so it shows that dynamic. We don't need to have all the information in the same manner that a woman might see. We'll know he's in the hospital. So our decision is, do we call or do we go?
Right.
Hey, so it looked like we've morphed. We've done, in part, a marriage show.
It all
Marriage counselor brought that up. Marriage counselor, he took us there.
But it speaks to understanding the dynamic of fatherhood and parenting. Because
And that's where I'm about to go. That's where I'm about to go, because one was marriage. Doc opened up this thing about processing too. How do how do women process? But I'm gonna try to, like Greg says, segue this thing into responsible fatherhood, because I'm really interested now. We talked about relationships. We talked about, that old saying about, what is it? Men are from Venus and women are from Mars or something. But how do we communicate from a responsible fatherhood perspective? And I'm glad we have women in the studio with us, because when we talk about responsible fatherhood, I told y'all this weekend, this woman performed James Brown. This is a man's world, but boy, the hook in that song say it would not be anything without a woman or a girl.
Absolutely.
And so when you talk about responsible fatherhood and the man is not in the home, and you said something earlier about maybe the relationship between that woman and that father, how do we get over that barrier? Because it does create a barrier. So how do we get over that so that the man, and I'm not making an excuse for men, because being responsible is being responsible. We talked about the difference between a father and a daddy, and we can morph into that more. But
right.
how do we get there when we talk about being a responsible father and getting those men to come in, that it's no taboo or shame to say, I need to do better and be better.
Yeah, that is true. I think with a lot of the relationships with the dad and the mom, a woman's perspective is, once you scorn me, I'm gonna try to get even with you.
But
And
through the children,
some of them, yeah.
Some of them are
Some of them, yeah, to be like, okay, so you're not with me, so then it's gonna be hard for you to see your child. And then that's when Doc says they put their feelings in it. That's when the feelings come into play, instead of saying, well, I need to put my feelings aside and focus on our
you
child.
sound like you about to be a professor over there. Now I'm gonna go to the curriculum developers.
Yeah.
Y'all got curriculum on it.
Yeah, you want
No, go right ahead.
I agree a lot with that, and I think what we have to do first is, it's almost like you have to pull them aside, each in their own corner, and get them to focus on what is most important here, right?
Yeah.
And so let's take ourselves out of it and let's focus on the child.
Is it that easy to do that?
No.
It's not easy to do, but I think it's that thing about being heard, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, I would sit down with him and hear everything that he has to say. Sit down with her, hear everything that she has to say, right? And then from that, I bring them back together. Okay, here's what he said. Here's what she said, right?
Okay.
And then what I'm trying to do is basically help them, first of all, just get through some of these feelings.
Yes.
And once
Yes.
they're able to talk about it, then from there, okay, now let's look at what's in the best interest of your son or
Makes
your
sense.
daughter.
Right.
Because
But
when you act this way, this is what your son has said. When
Yes.
you act this way, this is what your son has said about,
Oh, and not just
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
mirroring.
mirroring.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
so I think
the-
once they understand that, the magnitude of that, and getting them first to work out their nonsense,
Mhm.
Yeah.
then we can come together and then kind of really work on what's in the best interest of the child.
Man, you're right.
Yeah.
oftentimes in many of those relationships, what you're dealing with is people with low emotional IQ.
Absolutely.
And because of that, they don't have conflict resolution skills. They don't know how to de-escalate. They don't have the ability to have an empathetic reaction to what the person is saying, not listening. And you can't be heard when you're both shouting. No, and oftentimes that's what we're dealing with in the population. A good percent of the population that we all serve, we're dealing with people who have not learned these skills, these personal skills. So they're doing this in front of their children because oftentimes the antagonists are the other partner. Well, you did this, you did, and they keep score. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And so with that, you got to get to let them see themselves. And the avatar, is a great example doing that, showing them this is how it looks in real life. Now, a lot of people won't, they won't respond to it, but they'll maybe think about it.
If I could chime in, I was going to say, and that's one good thing about not shameless plug for the curriculum, but that's one of the things we wanted to try to do is really create an experience. Because most educational platforms or educational systems are based on perception, where I try to get you to see my perspective or my perception.
Right.
Our goal was to bring you into an experience, right? How do you experience? Because experience is the biggest driver of behavior. And you mentioned that you were in the military, right? How do we send you 3,000 miles away and know how you're going to potentially behave? We put you through an experience of 8 weeks
Training.
of boot camp,
Yeah.
and that experience drove your behavior. We know how to act because that experience prepared us for this. And that's what we
Right.
try to do with the curriculum, really create an experience so that the father, mother, and the co-parent relationship are brought into an experience that we hope then would drive future behavior.
And a lot of times it's exposing them to new tools, life skills.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that we don't. And I was thinking about this last night. The fact that men don't know how to be fathers, but women don't know how to be mothers and wives. And that's a result of the culture that we're in. Everybody is about what they want.
But Doc, we've had this and you know what? Let me erase the but, because I was taught whenever you put but,
Right.
you erase everything. So I'm not. So let me take the but
Yeah.
back. But Doc, we've had this conversation, and you're absolutely correct to the extent that as we've navigated and we talk about, you got to go and get your learner's permit to drive a 1-ton, 2-ton car.
Right.
There's a lot of things that you get prepared for before you do it. But think about raising a family, having children.
Yep.
These don't come with manuals.
No, there's no
But-
manual.
No manuals, but if you go
Yeah,
back,
yeah, they do.
but if you go back old school from
There
the
is
upbringing of our
there's
parents,
a book that is a guide, and it's been around for thousands of years.
the
The
Bible.
problem is they don't want to use it. Nobody wants to submit themselves to a structure. Okay, there's nothing in the Bible that's going to harm you, and using that as a foundation in which you build your house, your marriage, your business. Those are behaviors that 9 times out of 10 are going to lead to positive outcomes for you. But people don't know. People say, well, the Bible say, but they can't go to scripture, chapter, verse, and they say and find where the Bible say. That's a problem.
And I think people too don't understand the Bible. right?
Right.
There are people that can read something and don't have an understanding of it.
Right. That's comprehension.
And as a result, it shows up. But I think I was raised in a single family home, for example, and I learned from my mother how to be a woman, how to take care of my house, how to do, all these. I never had a father around, but I learned how to conduct myself through what she modeled for me, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of times these young people that are having kids out of wedlock, they don't have that at home.
Right.
They don't have
right.
a
And that's what I
father.
mean.
Right. So they model off of what they see on TV or what they see a friend doing or what's out in the, that's their point of reference, right? And so now we've got to change that and give them something and teach them. Because again, I can't expect somebody to do something they haven't been taught.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Once I teach them, then I'm going to hold them accountable, right? But to hold them accountable for something they know nothing about, I think that's irresponsible on us, right?
And I was going to say that is actually a Bible verse, Doc.
Mhm.
The Lord winks at your
The winks at your ignorance.
ignorance,
But he only winks for a little while, right?
right. But once
Yeah.
you know, then you're held
When
accountable.
you know better, you do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But when we talk about, and I'm glad you brought up the word accountability.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How do we get our arms around? And I mean, I want you to do, when you talked about a shameless plug of the curriculum, that curriculum is great. So, but how do we pair that with accountability fathers?
You know, that's a, I'm gonna say a loaded question, but it's a deep question because you can't make people do things they don't want to do. You just can't.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, in my corporate days, and I'm more of a science and numbers guy, so my references will always be in those places. You know, when I worked for General Electric, we had this statistic. It was 10, 70, 20. We felt like 10% of everyone in any room, any company, were your leaders, and they would automatically do the things they needed to do no matter what. You had 20% of the people in the company that we felt like were the detractors or the bottom of the barrel, the people who probably should not be with us. And then you had 70% who kind of were in the middle. They were either going to follow the leaders or follow the detractors. And so what we have to do in helping people be accountable is we got to find those leaders, stand them up, reward them, praise them, and say, hey, 70%, follow them. There's your models. There's your models. Because as you said, we don't have fathers in the household, but we have a lot of outstanding men. Dr. Polite, Dr. Nelson, Rod Love. How do we stand them up and make them our example?
But you know, Kenny, and I'm gonna go in on this piece. You got the 10% that are your proven leaders.
Yep.
Then you got that 20%. You know what the battle is for? And it's almost like an election. The battle is
70%.
Yeah, and that's why we always say, Grace, now we go out and we say we can help 80% of the population. We know the 20 we're not going to be able to help.
Yeah.
But if you go after that 80%, know that those individuals, it's a battle. It's oldest battle is the battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
It's the elections. What does the Bible say? Now you got me on the Bible. I'm not a Bible, but
Good place to be at.
a Christian, right? It's all the stuff just recycling all the same stuff.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we are fighting against the fear of what a Rod Love and a Kenny Smith represents. You represent achievement and excellence. And in our community, that is frowned upon. So we've got to change that narrative.
Doc, why is that frowned upon? Is it because it's in competition with social media and these misconceptions of social media that, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. We got rappers that make life from their perspective look so great, but
that's right.
It comes with a whole lot of baggage.
Well, in the first part of my life, I was in that world. And I can tell you that the cars, the houses, even the jewelry is rented. Okay, it's an illusion. It's an illusion of success.
Right.
And many times these guys are up to their their neck in debt to these labels, and basically, if you watch the TLC documentary, and they were talking about they were getting like $86 a month, was what they earned. You understand that it's propaganda for a reason. And so we've got that's a part of the education too. How do we tell young men, following Kanye ain't a good role model? Okay, because the moment he did something they didn't like, all of a sudden they took all his money. Oh, he's not a billionaire anymore. And see, and that's the illusion, because technically he was not a billionaire. So we've got to fight against that popular notion that that kind of lifestyle is desirable to attain, not the peaceful one we have. We don't worry about going to bed and the police kicking down the door. We don't worry about somebody coming by our house to rob us because they know we the dope man. And all of those things, we are able to love the ones around us. We can build a future. We have an idea, but we didn't just come to that. We had to learn that. Someone in our past took a opportunity to speak that into us, and we've got to start speaking more positivity into these young men.
So, Doc, that's the start. Grace, what you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because you said, how do we tell them? We can't tell them. We have to show them. So,
Right.
We when we had our youth build program, and the first week of our mental toughness week, we had speakers come in to talk to these young men. We had a black scientist, a black doctor, a black architect,
Black astronaut,
a black CPA,
pilot.
a black pilot. They all came in.
Thank you.
And
No
so
athletes.
those guys had never seen anything like that before.
Wow.
Right? And matter of fact, we had one guy that had just been released, all tatted up, had an ankle monitor on. He connected with the scientists, with
Engineer.
the engineer. He connected with him from NASA. And in the relation, and I was like kind of surprised. I'm like, how did you make that connection?
Yeah.
But this young man was just yearning for that attention and yearning to see somebody like him that looked like him in that position. So we have to show them. We can no longer tell them. We have to find ways in which to show them, hey, this is who you really are. This is what you can be. But it's going to take work. Because one thing that those guys did when they came in, they told them their stories. They told them, hey, I grew up in the same project you grew up in, but this is what I did differently.
Wow.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was impactful.
Yeah.
I had a quick story, not a story because I won't take too much time, but it is important that we do model for them, because kids do what they see, not what they're told.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Emulate.
And I use my younger brother as an example, who got caught up, ended up doing some time. And, I asked him, I said, dude, you had your older brother around you, who went off to the military and was doing well. You had me who was, I was struggling. I finished college and I was struggling. And he just basically said, I want it now. I don't want to wait.
Instant
Wow.
I
gratification.
want it now.
Yeah.
Like he saw it now. He said, I wanted it now. I just couldn't. And I often ask, is there anything we could have done that would have changed your mind? And he hasn't been able to answer me yet. And hopefully one day he'll be like, you know what? I think have this happen. And so that's the thing we battle right there.
Yeah.
That
And
gratification right there.
and I can tell you, because I've had this conversation with hundreds of young men, and it's often that they had a desire to be someone, which was the underlying motivation for many of them getting out there in their life. And they wanted it fast because nobody has ever valued them, and they seek that affirmation that
But
they
you know
are
what,
men.
Doc, on that note, just like we see financial literacy, FEC was doing it before they made it a law in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
But Doc, what do you think about the fact that I think what is absent is, while we're educating on different categories, I don't think there's enough education on consequences for our actions.
Yeah.
Well, the consequences need to be fair and just, and society is not doing that.
But if
It's
we know that, see,
disproportional.
this what men
Yeah.
talk get into. We
Yeah.
lock up on this, because we lock up on this because we lock up on this because my position is we already know that. And we already know, I mean, we've been taught, grandmama, granddaddy told us we got to be 120% better. So if we know this,
Yeah, but they ain't got grandma and grandpa telling them that.
That's what I was gonna say. They don't have that.
Grandpa and grandpa sitting there smoking weed with them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And
it's a big difference.
yeah, and consequences are not what they used to be. I mean, they're so there's just a lot of things that as we talk through our lens of, how we grew up, I'm going to say all of us are probably, Generation X or baby boomers, one of the two. Things are different. I look at my kids, right? I mean, I don't think my son ever got swatted in school. They were, the consequences were clearing in your face every day.
Yeah.
Walking down the street, doing something wrong, you may get it from auntie who wasn't your auntie, but you called her auntie because she lived on the corner. And then by the time you got home, your mom and dad got a call.
Yeah.
And, so we don't have that village that is around.
you hit that right on the head. Yeah.
Right. That's right.
And we got to really recreate that.
Yeah, they've broken up our village because when I was an educator in the school system, a child would get in trouble and I would call the parent. The parent will come and have an attitude with me. And head shaking, I mean, ready to, like she wants to fight me. Yeah. She wanted to fight me. And I'm like, I'm shocked. First of all, and she's coming up there in her pajamas, in her bonnet. And I keep telling my parents, I said, listen, they're not going to take you seriously if you walk into the school like that, right? And what is that that image, you walk in, your child is watching.
So let me ask you, from a cultural perspective, because you said something earlier, and I started to ask you this, that young man that had the electronic monitoring on the thing. Now, here's something that is fact. When I was with Department of Juvenile Justice and we sent our staff through training so that you can understand the different cultures. I mean, if you have a kid that goes into the Juvenile Assessment Center, for them to process them, if you would, well, when they're giving self-disclosure and, a kid is looking down, the person who's doing the assessment is going to think you're not being truthful.
Right.
But what we found is when you look at Asian kids, in the culture of Asian kids, it was respectful not to look in the
give you eye
dark.
contact.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I go back to the electronic monitoring piece. In the Hispanic community, if a young kid got placed on electronic monitoring and you saw him out in the street, he got on long pants. Unfortunately, you see African American
They
kids
show it off. It's
Yeah.
a
like
badge
it's
of
cool.
honor.
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor. And you know why? Because the media outlet, the music they listen to, the music videos, they're rapping and they have all of these things on. So our kids watching are thinking, this is what I aspire, right? This is what I aspire to be. So I feel sorry for our young people.
Emulate.
Yeah.
I want to grow up to be. He's making the fast money,
Right.
looking good.
So wrap this around y'all head. How do you tie that back to being a responsible father? And then when we talk about evolution in church this weekend, I talked about our responsible fatherhood initiative, but I said that's the start. Where I would love for everybody to be is to be that dad, the evolution of that whole process. Anybody can be a father.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
When you posed that question to me today, I went back to the hotel and I Googled. But then this is what I did. I said, don't Google. Take it inside and help me understand what a dad is to you. And I literally realized what a dad is to me. It's not Google or Webster's definition.
Right.
It's actually the child's. Because I'm gonna give you an example. Both my stepfather and my biological father are dead. I saw my biological father for the last time. I think I was 20 years old. I was playing college basketball, and I went to go play, and my father was in the stands. I walked over. I said, "Hey guys, come here. This is my father." Right?
Man.
And then, how you doing? How you doing? But if I ever introduced anyone to the man who raised me, he was my daddy.
Dad, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my daddy.
Yeah.
That's my daddy. So I consciously, literally didn't call him Daddy, that's my father.
Right.
So I think honestly that when I looked inside, I said, Kenny, I decided who I was going to call father,
Yeah.
who I was going to take, because there was an emotional connection to my stepdad who raised me. He was
Right.
the guy who reared me, who cared for me, who
Right.
was there to protect me. That's my dad.
Kenny, I got to tell you something.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you were describing that,
Yeah.
I felt that.
Yeah. Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
I know I felt it too when I thought about it, because you had me back at the hotel Googling, and I was like, he gonna pose this
Yeah.
question. I gotta understand what
Yeah.
this is, and I really
Yeah.
thought about like, man,
Yeah.
And
I
and
decided who daddy
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
That's right.
and
Like,
and
I
that's
gotta-
that distinction is very important. It
Yeah.
is very important because the one that can inspire you, you will always learn and keep those lessons because you respected that person. That person respected and cared about you. They thought enough of you to pour that into you, to give you that foundation for being a human. A lot of times they've given you the capacity to forgive. They've given you the capacity to love. They've given you the capacity to understand. And then you take that on and you send it off into your family. You know, I got 3 kids. Last time I spanked one of them was my son was, I think, maybe 7. After that, it was all sit down, let's talk. Why? Because that was the model that I got in parenting.
I didn't get that one, but
You didn't-
Yeah.
And so, you know,
I didn't get none of them sitting there.
But that's
But
important.
think-
That,
yeah.
go ahead.
yeah.
That is something that my dad used to do with me. I mean, I used to get them. I'd be like, oh my God, I got to get another one. But I knew there was consequences
Right.
to my action.
Right.
And then
Right.
if you bring home bad grades,
Mhm.
you already know what your consequences
That's right.
gonna be. So I would just be ready. Want
Right.
to go get the belt for you?
Right.
I already know.
And
Exactly.
Ms. Wynn, I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
when we talk about responsible fatherhood, some people are, and when I say some people, it's the conversations that they've had with me, kind of misinterpret what this initiative is all about. They think it's about fathers and their sons. No, this is about fathers and their children.
That's
It's a
right.
couple.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teaching fathers to be dads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and being a dad involves involvement,
Mhm.
Yeah.
personal
Yeah.
connection,
Yep.
Yep.
and the role they play in their child's
That's
life.
it.
Yep.
Right.
That's the
A,
difference, right?
a dad is a transformer. He will change everything in that atmosphere, whether that child is his biological
Yep.
or not.
Right.
My son friends used to be at our house all the time. Why? Because they saw me. He was one until me and his mom divorced. He was one of the few kids in our neighborhood that had a father that worked every day, that had goals and things like that. So that's important.
And it's so funny that you say that because you can hear some kids now saying, "Oh, your dad lived with you."
Right.
And
Oh,
see,
yeah.
that's
Right.
You know,
That's
The
deep
knowledge,
right there.
when
yeah.
they be
Mhm.
like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah." It's like you're the like
Yeah.
I don't even know where my dad is.
That's
Yeah.
right. I've
And
heard
it's
that
like,
many
oh,
times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, it does make an impact.
It does. I just finished, just to throw this, I just finished reading a book by a gentleman by the name of Mark White. I met him in Tennessee at a responsible fatherhood forum, and he has this really nice book, and he says, "Can I call you Dad?" It's about 82 pages, and the thing I took from this book, and it was so profound. This one statement he made. He said that it is important, especially for fathers, to love their kids unconditionally and show them that. He says, because you will be the last person to give that child unconditional love.
Man,
When they step out into this world, everyone else will love them for something.
Yes.
What you can do for me.
yeah.
You know, what you
Yeah.
look like.
Yeah, you're right.
What you
Yeah.
make me feel like.
Right.
But that, and that's what he talked about in being a father. If there's one thing, or dad, the one thing you can do is make sure you demonstrate and love your children unconditionally.
Yeah.
And that's the last time they'll get it.
When Doc just mentioned his kids' friends used to hang out at his house,
Mhm.
is because, you know, it's amazing to us that those kids who might be absent, that at home, they look for it in other people's homes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
Yeah.
and when they saw how Doc was not demonstrating but showing how to be a dad.
Mm-hmm.
Those kids like, man, I'm a hangover at Tommy's house. Not to say
Right.
your kid named Tommy,
Yeah.
but
absolutely.
they would hang over there.
Yeah,
But-
yeah,
Yep.
And oftentimes, what we're seeing as well is the inability of parents to effectively communicate. A lot of these parents, we look back on it now, and we didn't understand that. Those spankings were often because those people lacked the ability to explain to you what you did wrong and come up with a solution. I can tell you that.
But my mom
Because-
still says she owes me for some stuff she didn't get me.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but oftentimes that it was the
I
default
remember
thing.
last time I got a whooping. It worked because I was like, listen, I said to myself, I am not getting no more whoopings. I am not going to do anything else getting no whoopings. I remember I was 11 years old. I was like, I'm not getting no more whoopings.
yeah.
And after that day, I never got another whooping.
Well, we all learned it's either
Wow.
'Cause I
we
never
either
did-
learn
they-
from
they-
pain or
they
pleasure.
poured me a whooping. I knew the lines were drawn. These are the things that you get a whooping for.
So here's the thing, yeah, and I think we've gone in this society have taken it like to one extreme to the next.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
I grew up where I may have gotten a spanking. I can count how many times because, like you said, I learned
Yeah.
that when I did this, I got spanked for it, so therefore I didn't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So society has deemed it, oh, you can't spank your child, you can't
Yes.
do this, you can't do
Yes.
that, and now parents like their kids. Sometimes you should see how. I hear how they talk to their parents in restaurants.
Yes.
Mom,
Oh, yeah.
Mom, do this. I saw a little boy today in a restaurant sitting on the table, jumping up and down. And I looked at Kenny and said, if that was my son,
Oh yeah.
2 slaps, he would have sat down,
Mm-hmm.
no problem.
And,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
be worried about somebody holding their camera
Camera.
up, waiting for
Absolutely.
DCF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you know what? Let me do this because we've had a great conversation. Florida Economic Consortium facilitates the Responsible Fatherhood Initiative in Orange County and in Seminole County. Our Orange County contractor is the Experience Christian Church, and over in Seminole County we have No Limits Counseling and Education. So if you're interested in registering, enrolling, and this,
Yeah.
let me say this, and Kenny and Grace, y'all back me up on this thing. This work is not hard work; it is hard work.
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
you add to this because y'all have been as
Yeah.
much of a part of this Responsible Fatherhood Initiative as anybody else has been. And shoot, y'all started in
Charlotte,
Mecklenburg.
yeah.
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 2019.
Well, it's important work, and I'm just going to give you one example. We had a young man come into our youth program. He was a father. He was homeless, living in his car at the time. He finished and got his certification. We were able to get him a job. And so the woman was keeping the son away from him, saying, you're no good. You don't need to be in his life. So now he got a job. He got an apartment, got a new car, and then took her to court and got custody of
Wow.
his son.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Wow.
And you know what Grace just helped me do? I forgot to mention, we do have a relationship with Community Legal that helps with child support issues as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say this because again I'm a numbers guy, but this work is important to me. It's hard because I want to see the communities rebuilt.
Yeah.
All communities,
Mhm.
right? In this politically charged climate that we are in right now, there's one thing for sure that I know both the Democrats and Republicans they agree on. The Brookings Foundation, which is the Democratic think tank, and the Heritage Foundation, which is the Republican think tank. They say if you do these 3 things, you will avoid poverty in your adult life. 97% less likely to have poverty in your adult life. You do these 3 things. 1, don't have kids out of wedlock. 2, finish high school. 3, get a full-time job. By putting fathers back in the families, by putting fathers back in the families and back in their communities, we take care of the first 2.
Yeah.
70% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless households.
Yeah.
And 71% of all teen pregnancies come from fatherless households.
Yeah.
So we knock out 2 of the 3 just by helping fathers
That's right.
be dads.
Increase all the
I got a question before we go. I want to ask y'all because y'all are here in town. This is my question. Why in the hell do people have kids and they can't afford them? I've never understood that.
That's a
I mean,
conversation for
literally-
another day because they can't afford them.
Yeah.
You just don't get- so-
Yeah.
No,
I
no.
don't wanna go
What
down
what I
that
mean
path
by
because-
that, what I mean by that is that they are struggling themselves
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
with
But
housing, with all of that, and yet they go and they bring a kid into that equation, and they aren't able to provide for that child, and they know that.
Well, here's the thing, and I'll say this, and
Yeah,
that is definitely different because
That's definitely another show.
that's another
That's a
show.
lot.
Because spending 16 years in this industry, like Grace and I have, not saying no one has, but we run a variety of different programs. We've learned a lot of things, and I would tell you, sometimes having children has economic impacts on people's pockets in a positive way, and I'll leave it at that. That's another conversation for
Well, that's
another
the
day.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
this is a whole
yeah,
nother conversation.
that's the conversation of the day. And you know what? Here's why I'm gonna bring us in for a landing, because you take us in for a landing, but you're really getting us to glide up higher.
We're going
And there's a lot of dialogue
Yeah.
about basically those incentives that folk were looking at when you talk about having children. Now folk are sitting back, and I'll just go ahead and say it. I'm gonna take a few more minutes with
Yeah.
this conversation. Under former President Bill Clinton, he instituted the welfare reform, whereby back when you used to be able to get subsidies, Section 8, food stamps, you had to go and Ken, me and you, Grace was talking about this earlier. You had to show that you were looking for work.
Yeah.
Now, and we don't know that it's etched in stone yet, but now you got to go get a job,
Yep.
even though the wages is going to be what they call below living wages. You got to have a job to be able to be continued on, which I got no problem with.
No, I don't have a problem with
So
that.
so yeah, Doc loves to do this. He
Well,
waits
no,
till the day
no,
comes to-
I wanted to ask them. Listen, I wanted to ask them that question because I respect the work and the breadth of knowledge
Yes.
that they have, and I wanted to hear that from their perspective.
That's a really, really deep account because we live in a world of complexity, and so I don't think in the last 30 seconds I can answer your question properly.
Yeah, 'cause
But Dr. Polite, I got your phone number.
Yeah.
We can talk about that because I can tell already. There's gonna be some back and forth on this one.
Yes.
Hey, well, tell you what, I got to bring us in for a landing, but I do want to thank once again Kenny and Miss Grace Smith with Graymar.
Grace Mar.
Grace Mar. Grace Mar. I'm always doing that. And out of Charlotte, but how do people get a hold of you if they want to use your consulting services or your curriculum? Because y'all got a lot going on.
Yeah, we do. Go ahead, Kenny.
Well, our website is www.gracemar.org. Our phone number is 704-909-6041. Again, that phone number is 704-909-6041.
And I greatly appreciate Doc Polite does some work on this project. As y'all know, Miss Wynn, operations manager, doing a great job on this. But greatly appreciate the contributions that y'all are bringing to the state of Florida with this project too.
Thank you.
Hey, tune in next week for the sit down. We'll be back here same time, same place, and we look forward to having you. Doc Polite, I'll catch you in the next hour.
All righty.
Y'all have a good
Bye,
one.
everyone.
Good night.